Welcome back to Sunday Nation. On the heels of the one-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine, President Biden went to Poland and delivered a speech challenging Russia's President Vladimir Putin. Well, a long-time community advocate, teacher, and a professor, historian, Charles Simmons from Detroit, has some very strong opinions about our need to be involved in international affairs. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Bankole. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I want to begin with Ukraine. The one-year anniversary, we saw President Biden went to Poland, gave this big speech. American tax dollars still on the stake here in Ukraine.
Well, it's more than a one-year involvement in Ukraine. We've been involved in Ukraine at least since 2014. And the United States encouraged our troops to move closer and closer to the border of Russia right after the Soviet Union had collapsed.
Right, the fall of the USSR.
And I remember clearly when Gorbachev and President Reagan had the conversation. Reagan agreed that when Russia changed from Soviet Union to the Russia and from the socialist to the capitalist camp, that NATO would not move any closer to the Russian border. The next day, we were moving closer to the border. And we have surrounded Russia and pushed them up against the wall. Now, I don't support either side. There was a great Russian writer, Tolstoy, that he was asked during the war between Japan and Russia back in 1900. Who he supported. He said neither side. He supports the poor people on both sides who are being lied to by the corporations and the big...
Now, and I know your background is also in international affairs and media.
Yes.
Was this before Reagan went on with tear down this wall?
It was around the same time.
Around the same time.
Yes.
So let's bring it back to the modern era we find ourselves here. How important is it, you think, for the American public to be informed on these international issues?
It's crucial. We're on the brink of a nuclear war as we speak. Both sides have been increasing their nuclear capability, and it seems like both sides are no longer afraid of nuclear war. But what's the impact of that on the people? So we're talking about having a democratic society, which Thurgood Marshall, who was on the Supreme Court many years ago, he said that we have not achieved democracy in the United States. We're still struggling to achieve it. But one of the things that's required is to have a media that informs the public honestly about the policies so that we know how to make policy. But we have not been getting accurate information about the war. We have not been getting accurate information about the United States foreign policy for a long time, and it's just getting worse. I used to be able to look at the international media, the Western media from London and France, and so on, and there used to be a lot of differences.
Different versions of their coverage.
Of information. Today it's very similar about this attack on Ukraine. However, the ordinary people in the streets, look at the international media right now. I mean, international populations are protesting all over Europe. They do not support this war. They are calling for a peaceful negotiation. And the world, the countries of Africa, Asia, South America, do not go along with this war. They want peace. And so in order to have development anywhere, we have to have a peaceful environment.
Yeah.
So we can't have the education, the healthcare, all the other things that we need in the society without peace.
So as you're speaking, though, my mind is going back to Dr. King's speech Beyond Vietnam.
67.
Yeah, that he gave at Riverside Church in New York. And even though, you know, our troops are not on the ground in Ukraine,
well, there may
tax
be.
dollars.
There may be.
Right, but tax dollars are on the line here. I'm curious, though, given your background in international affairs, what are the lessons here from Vietnam? Is there a correlation to modernity and, you know, our involvement in modern conflicts here?
Yes, the Vietnam War, Reverend King spoke out against the Vietnam War, saying that it was immoral because we should be calling for peace and justice, and we were destroying the country. You know, today, a lot of Vietnam has a very good agricultural land,
Yeah.
And most of it is useless because of the bombing that we did for years throughout the country. Now, so we don't even talk about the environmental impact of warfare.
Right.
But we have to have a policy that promotes peace. We have to have, peace should be the primary objective of international relations.
Right.
The military should be the last resort. Now we have become a society that uses we call the military first. Let's go for our guns whenever we have a disagreement. Now maybe that wouldn't have mattered when we were using sticks and stones, but we're using we have weapons of mass destruction right now. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about destroying all life on the planet, mm-hmm. humans, animals, the mm-hmm. ocean, everything. Mm-hmm. And so we can't even debate that. And so the citizens need to know the truth about what's happening, and we don't.
So I'm looking, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the public engagement here. So we go back to the apartheid era, the anti-apartheid era.
Right.
There was heightened public engagement. Randall Robinson with Trans-Africa Forum. There were all kinds of activities being held around the country to get people involved in international issues when apartheid was the common denominator at the time here. I'm thinking, how do we bring that kind of an interest back to what we're dealing with now?
That's what I want to do.
Well, let's talk
now,
about,
I was working for Congressman John Conyers during that period, and that anti-apartheid movement was one of the best examples, well, Vietnam also, in terms of what ordinary people can do mm-hmm. to make the government change its policies. Mm-hmm. We had the members of Congress organized the Black Caucus.
Yes.
And Conyers was one of the leaders. They had a plan in order to get the media to come back every day to the picket line at the South African Embassy in D.C.
Where he was arrested.
Yeah, so they decided that if you could get a celebrity to come to the picket line every day, the media would come back every day.
Stevie Wonder and all of them.
Stevie Wonder, all the entertainers, the athletes. Everybody came and got arrested, and that kept the media present. And the students around the United States and around the world protested, and they made the universities pull their money out of banks that had investments.
The divestment movement.
And the divestment movement was very strong. And there was even a movement within the military. There was a peace movement within the Army and the Air Force among the ordinary soldiers.
Within the military industrial complex.
I covered that. I covered that in Europe. And the faith community pulled their money out of the banks that were supporting the military-industrial complex. Right. So that forced the government to change its policies.
Right. So you are a historian. Tell me what has happened during that anti-apartheid movement and now. What has transpired that has led us to this point where those strategies are no longer common?
Well, there was a lot of media about what was happening in Vietnam, a lot of media about what was happening in South Africa.
Yeah.
There has been some change in the government policy towards the media. This is not on paper. This is what the practice that I see.
Right.
They don't let journalists go and cover these wars and conflicts like they used to. They don't give them the space and the access to information to be able to run around independently. They have to go into a press room where the Pentagon gives you a press release and tells you what's happening. You can't go out for yourself.
Well, during the war in Iraq, they had what they call embedded reporters.
Embedded, right.
Yeah.
And so you're traveling around with a group of military people. You become attached to those people emotionally. You can't, people are dying. I mean, war is a horrible, the most horrible of human experiences.
Yes. Yeah.
But the generals, the people who planned this, they know this up front. And so they control how the media is going to be used, and they demonize people they don't like. So we just become angry at this person. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes, who's investing in what. The only beneficiaries of any war is the military-industrial complex, which General Eisenhower pointed out when he resigned many years ago. Right. And we haven't had that type of leadership on a military-industrial complex to keep it down since Eisenhower.
So let's talk about the role of elected office here, though, in terms of our politicians, right? Because most of the things that you're talking about, some of it has to be routed. During apartheid, you had consensus politicians like John Conyers and others. You had the congressman out of Oakland, California, Ron Dellums, and others, you know, so forth. But in this age, though, I mean, who do you look to? I mean, who are the examples out here in terms of within, you know, black elected leadership, black elected office? Do we have to express hope?
We have to have hope, but it's going to be grassroots people who force the politicians, whoever they happen to be, to force them to do the right thing. Now, I think we have to call on the churches now, the faith community, whether they're Christians, Jews, Muslims, whatever, to take a stand to push the idea of blessed are the peacemakers. That has to be our lead, and get the ministers, all of the religious leaders to stand up, as did Martin Luther King, and say we want a peaceful world. Now, we're not going to agree with everybody around the planet. We don't agree with people, I mean, in our house.
Right, yeah.
But that doesn't mean we had to kill them.
Yeah.
You know, and so we have to develop a new way of thinking about this. And first of all, we have to tell the truth. And so there was old saying, tell the truth and ride a fast horse. But that's what we've got to do, because so much is at stake now. Yeah. The planet is at stake. We've got the military threat of destruction, and then we've got the climate change of destruction. So we have to work harder to build unity. And we know we don't have the strength of the trade union movement like we used to. That was a major force. Right. So we need to rebuild a stronger trade union movement around the country. People are going on strikes every day all around the country. Right. As we haven't done since the 1930s. Right. So we've got to pull the people who are working on the environmental issues, the faith community, people working about housing, healthcare. We've got to work together for a strong force to make the politicians do the right thing. They're not going to just do it on their own, because they're getting paid for their campaigns by the military-industrial complex.
So they have to be forced to do it while they're kicking and screaming.
Yes, we need to. We've got, you know, the people who are in the trade unions have to unite with the environmentalists. We're all breathing. There's just one air. Right. Doesn't matter. Yeah. I remember we had a demonstration about environmental demonstration some years ago, and I remember they had experts from Brazil who were saying that the air coming from in Detroit, some of it was coming from Brazil. We got toxic air going to Paris, you know. So that all the air in the world circulates, just like the water. We have to make sure that everybody has clean air and water. That's that should be a part of the democratic process.
So because we're all caught up in the same interconnected struggle.
Everybody and every issue, every nation, we're all linked on this tiny planet.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right, the Venerable Professor, teacher, and longtime advocate historian Charles Simmons. We'll be right back after this break.